So now I showed you the app that you're building and the workflows you're going to get used to. So let's talk about this UX side, this user experience side, this software design side, I should say. So the first step when designers start thinking about designing a piece of software is they think about themselves as a user first. So how do you think about designing for other people? First, you have to think about yourself. So designers will think about themselves as users. So the first step that's common is called a cognitive walkthrough. So I'm going to do it, and then I ask you to do these later on, and you can pick your own app to review. But a cognitive walkthrough is like verbalizing your thoughts as you're working with a piece of software. So normally a user has some type of task in mind. Um, so let me just show you that there's this user flow diagram examples here. And it'll link you over here. And so diagrams are used in many ways to describe processes. It's not just for software, although they're heavily used in software. And there's many different types of things to diagram. Building software is complicated. Building anything is complicated. And so to help people communicate with each other, we use visuals. And in this class, we're going to use one specific type of diagram, just called user flow diagrams. But just to get used to like the diagramming nature, this is a diagram from for a generic business process. As you take classes here, mostly they'll be about more boring or businessy type stuff, like how does somebody use a banking website. In this case, it's like, oh, we have to determine if someone's going to order some stock, if we should replenish it, or how does we process an order from a customer. And so it's like, all right, so some type of stock process happened. Someone wants to order something, and then we hit like a decision point. Is this a frequently performed process? No. Well, then we have to create a work order, and we have to add materials. Then we have to monitor with the work order, see if they're in stock. Are they in stock or not? Then we procure them, and we ship them, and we invoice, and eventually we get to the end. So it's just documenting part of a process. There can be many processes, but we're just focusing on one specific spot, and it has a start and an end. And normally there's a title at the top. It's like, we are talking about this. So something you're going to see a lot, like a bank website. Sure. So what happens with banking software? We start the process. There's a login page. User has to enter their credentials. Was it correct? If it's not, we might need to go through some type of password reset, check our database. Is it correct? Do we need to update it? Was it incorrect? Do we have to block the user or confirm their updates? Either way, we come back up to the beginning. And then we go through this cycle again, and hopefully this time the user got it correct. Then we can allow them to view their account details. And one thing that's of note is that this might be considered something more like a user journey. There might be other parts on the account web page. They could do other things, other actions, but in this case, we're just documenting paying a credit card. So how much are we paying? The website will respond in different ways based on whatever the user chooses, and then we process it, and there's an end. So usually pieces of software, websites, apps, games are way too complicated to put into like one diagram as you're explaining it for your team with your designers and your developers. So user flows could be broken down into user journeys, where it's like, what's the preferred way that a user moves through this situation? Yes, we can handle the edge cases, the errors. We can also, if they choose other paths, we can create another diagram that we could go to. But rarely you don't throw everything into one big diagram. So get comfortable with like a feature or a journey or a diagram that's about of this size. Now notice the shapes are different. The statements are very verbose, short, to the point, have some type of action oriented to them. Notice how like the beginning and the end is this rounded rectangle. Whenever there's a computer process, it's a straight edge rectangle. Whenever we become to a decision point, there's a diamond. We normally flow from top to bottom or left to right. Usually there's one arrow connecting each shape and there's one direction for the arrow. Although when there's a decision point, we can allow loops. And this one doesn't have parallelograms, but this basic symbols, this is what we're going to be following for this class. So the start and the end is designated with a rounded rectangle. There has to be a nice title at the top designating what the feature, what the journey is about. Everything's very clear to understand. There's always one arrow pointing from shape to shape, one way to move through it. If there's multiple ways, use diamonds. If things get too complicated, that means you need to break it up into separate diagrams. The parallelogram, or the angled rectangle, is for input and output. So user input, keyboard, mouse clicks, touch events on a touch screen, voice commands. If you're on a cell phone, the gyroscope or the accelerometer of how you're moving the cell phone is also an input. Anything that the user is doing to the hardware that the computer can, that the software can respond to, would be an input. Output is going to be like the user did something, the computer has processed, went to the back end or whatever. It's time to update the user interface to show the user the changed state of the software. So the visuals on the monitor, audio coming out of the speakers, haptics on your game controller, vibrations. But in this class, we're going to focus mostly just on input. So keyboard presses, mouse clicks, touch screen events. Usually it's the user's doing something, the computer's responded, the user's doing something. There's a lot of back and forth because we're looking at the front end. We're looking at the interface. And in this case, a painting app, it's highly responsive to what the user is doing. And a process, computer processing, either on your CPU or on your GPU on your local machine, or processing done on the server or the cloud, that's all rectangle. And any decision point is a diamond. All right, so if we go back and look at what we're building, I have 3 simple features that I'm building for this first sprint, this first section. There's the painting flow is like the most central interaction of this, since it's a painting app. We start. This is a process. We're cueing the user for input. We're giving them directions. We're letting them know how to use our app. The user, this should be updated to left click, but in either case, there's a user input, right click or left click. We create an object. We randomize the size. We randomize the scale, and we place it where it looks like it's at the user's mouse position. And as the user still clicking, we still create stuff. So this is like the dragging loop. And then we end. So changing a primitive, we start, we cue the user, we somehow show them that there's this drop down, there's this UI element, you can use it, it'll change your app, or it'll change the functionality of your app. The user clicks on it, we display a list of choices in the drop down, and which shape did the user click on? Did they click on the cube, the sphere, or the cylinder? There should probably be like a fourth one, like the user clicks off the list and closes it and doesn't select anything. But in any case, we change our painted object to whatever the choice was. Usually diamonds have just like a yes, no, like a bool, but that doesn't limit it to just 2 choices. In this case, I have a 3-choice decision diamond. And then in either case, decision was made, we end that feature. It's a distinct little piece. There's nothing more to think about. So changing the color, we start, cue the user for input, which is these RGB sliders, red, green, blue. The user is dragging on a slider, which slider, and depending if it's red, green, blue, we change the color properties of the object that they're going to paint. And if we're still dragging, we continue the process, the loop, until we end. All right. For the rest of this class, I'm going to use some elements of Google Drive. So you have access to it with your NJT account. You have unlimited storage. The first thing, I just want to show you what a cognitive walkthrough is. So I'll just create a Google drawing. I'm going to just walk through using Google Drawing, but you can. I have students who like document how they use Google Maps or navigation or whatever, banking software or the NJT website. It doesn't matter. When you do this, you want to think about the action statements of a task that you're trying to perform with a piece of software. So the one I usually do with this class is like drawing a face or drawing an eye in a face. So you're presented with this user interface. It looks like this is like the drawing area or a canvas. You know, it's like some measurement tool here. I'm just like looking around the user interface to see what I can recognize. We have like our standard command drop downs. And, you know, these to me look like the main tools of the program. I got this kind of like arrow thing. It's not really doing much. I click over here. I do get like a drop down. And some of these, okay, looks like there's like different types of shapes I can use. So I look over here and I can see that there's some basic shapes. So maybe this circle, this oval might be of use. If I drag it out, I look at it and either I can be like, oh, this wasn't right for me. This isn't the right shape for a head. And I can delete it. And I can go back and try again and get it to be like the shape that I think is correct for a head. But if I do have it like this, I can also notice that, well, there do seem to be these visuals. And as I hover over them, the mouse shape changes. So if I do try to use them, it does change the shape of the shape of the object. And I can move or reposition the object by clicking in the middle. And I could also resize it in both directions, like up and down and left and right with the corner. So it's pretty intuitive to learn the tools if you never used it before. And I can kind of keep scaling it until I get the shape of a head. The next thing I might think of is that color might not look right. So I could see that, you know, this color matches the color up here. So that might be my first indication that this is the color tool I want to use. And I could just pick one of these colors, be like, well, this is like the skin color I'm trying to get. And if it's not close enough, you can keep picking it. The outline, it's a cartoony face, so the outline looks right for me. And if I'm happy with the head, I might go back and, you know, choose the same shape because the eye is a circle as well. And try to scale it, position it, and then be like, well, the color might be more like this. And I could keep going and be like, okay, I'm trying to make like a pupil for the eye. And yeah, you can keep drawing if you want to. But that's the essence. Me as a user wanted to draw a face. And so I was kind of like verbalizing my thoughts of using the interface and what I thought it was doing. And if I wasn't right, you know, I just kept trying to use it. But if you notice, it was like action statements. I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to find that, and I'm trying to use it. And that's the statements, like a cognitive walkthrough of me using it. So each of those statements actually will turn into a shape in your diagram. So cognitive walkthrough, as I was doing it, I was like, maybe I opened the app. Maybe I was prompted to understand the UI. Maybe I selected the shape drop down, and maybe, you know, like computer presented list of shapes, and maybe like I'll just call myself user then. I would just say like user, bless you, selected the oval shape, and maybe you could say like mouse pointer changed icon to represent new mode. And maybe like user left dragged to create oval. And say like computer drew oval. User left dragged to resize oval. Computer drew updated oval. User left dragged to like reposition oval. And like we could go into how I selected the colors. So user selected fill color and so on. Anyway, it's a list of back and forth with what did I, the user, do and the computer do in response to achieve a task. But it's by verbalizing your thoughts for each discrete step along the way, you have kind of these lists of actions. And I'm only looking for like a list of maybe 10 to 15 long. My feature diagrams are just small enough to be easy to deal with. But anyway, that's the process of a cognitive walkthrough. For me, it was to draw an eye and a face. You could say, I want to find directions to a restaurant or whatever, you know, whatever software or website you want to use. And the next thing to show you is the diagramming tool. So I'm using this diagrams.net. It's free. To find it, it's actually, they renamed it. It's called Draw.io. But here it is here. You could just install it. Once you do, you'll get the ability to create a file like this. And I'm in dark mode. You'll probably be white screen. But here's just the basic icons you'll be using right here. So here's a text. This will be the title of your feature. You have to start your journey off. So you're going to need a rounded rectangle. Usually there's some type of prompt. The user needs to know how they're using your software. Usually there's some type of user interaction. And some type of resulting process. Maybe the user has to make a decision at this point. And the user makes a decision. Maybe there's some process. And eventually there'll be an end with a rounded rectangle. So these are all the symbols you'll be using, need to know about. If you click on a symbol, you have this really easy way just to create the line. If it's not a straight line, you can just move the shape a little bit. If the line doesn't do what you want, you can just drag it out for more manual builds or connection. And you could just use these little icons here to reset this or build your line the way you want. And it makes for a really easy diagramming situation. So this is why I like to use this tool in this class. All right. And I kind of had draw the eye and the face already. So I'll just open that. So from your cognitive statements, you might, if it's okay to write them out to like a long sentence, but when you reuse them, when you read each statement, it should be apparent to you, was it a user input? Was it a computer process? Was it a decision point? You'd pick the related symbol, and you're probably not gonna be able to fit the whole sentence in. You just have to do like a little blurb on it. But here's that drawing the eye. So you cue the user to pick the shape. User left click on a tool. Did they pick the circle? Nope. Let's undo it. Let's try it again. Did you pick the circle this time? Yes. Awesome. Let's left click or left drag to create the shape. Let's choose the correct outline color. You didn't do that. That's all right. Let's try it again. The computer updates the color. You're going to left click, choose the fill. And in this case, let's say we like what we see, and we're done. All right, so that was the process of, as a designer, thinking about a user completing a task with your software, mapping out the cognitive walkthrough, the action statements, and creating your diagram. And so that's how I created my diagrams for this painting app. The painting flow, the changing the primitives, and changing the color, which I'll go back to the more basic version, which is right here. Here's the painting, changing the painting shape, and changing the color. All right, it's just going to take 3 weeks to build that. Cool. That is everything you need to know